She said my dog barked too much, handed me a citation, and pointed to the clause circled in red. Fix it in 48 hours, or we'll fine you $200 a day. I tried to explain, but she wasn't listening. And what she didn't know? I'm deaf in one ear, and that dog, he's the only one who hears for me. My name is Elena Ramirez. I'm 58 years old, retired postal worker, and I've lived on this quiet cul-de-sac in San Mateo, California since 1997. I lost most of my hearing in my left ear after an infection in my early 30s. Since then, I've relied on routines, lip reading, and one very special dog. His name is Tucker. He's a golden retriever, 8 years old, and the first thing I hear in the morning is him nudging me awake when the doorbell rings or the kettle starts whistling. I trained him myself. He's not just a pet, he's a part of my senses. So when the HOA president showed up on my porch with a clipboard and a warning about unreasonable barking, it didn't just feel like a complaint, it felt like a threat to my independence. See, I live alone. My husband passed away in 2015. My kids live out of state. Tucker, he's not just my companion. He's my early warning system, my reason to get out of bed, my reminder to keep living. They said he was a nuisance, but he's my lifeline. Where are you watching from? And have you ever had someone try to take away the one small thing that helps you survive each day? That one thread holding everything together? Stick with me. Because what started with a barking complaint turned into a battle for dignity. And in the end, let's just say, Tucker wasn't the one making all the noise. Mornings on Birch Lane were gentle, not quiet necessarily, but gentle. The kind of mornings where you could hear sprinklers clicking on one by one and the distant rumble of a delivery truck easing down the hill like it had been trained not to wake the flowers. The sun, too. You cheed everything golden. The sidewalk warmed early, and on my porch, you'd always find Tucker, stretched out like a sentry, head lifted, tail thumping softly whenever a neighbor walked by. I've lived here for 28 years. In that time, houses have been painted over, children have grown up and moved away, and lawns have shifted between tidy and overgrown depending on who just got knee surgery or who started watching grandkids. But some things never changed, like the smell of jasmine in May or how you could tell the time just by the way the light hit the driveways. My routine was just as steady. 30 a.m. Tucker nudges me gently. Never barks. He knows better than to startle me. I lost most of the hearing in my left ear when I was 31, an infection they didn't catch in time. Since then, I sleep with my good ear buried in the pillow and my body trained to wake from vibration more than sound. Tucker knows it all, the rhythm of the kettle, the knock on the door, the way the dishwasher beeps when it's done. He was never formally trained as a service dog, but sometimes life trains animals better than institutions do. He picked it up. He picked me up. After breakfast, we'd walk the block. Me with my coffee, him on a loose leash with his tail swinging like a metronome. Most neighbors waved. A few would stop and chat. Mr. Yamamoto, 3 doors down, always saved one of his Sunday donuts for Tucker. Kids from the yellow house would come running out to pet him, asking if he knew any tricks. He does. He knows how to listen. That's rare these days. Back home, I'd settle into the garden. Tomatoes along the west fence. Zinnias, roses, and sunflowers climbing the trellis. The HOA liked to send around landscaping reminders every few months, but my yard never got one. It was a little wild, sure, but alive. No plastic flamingos, just bees and blooms and peace. Tucker would chase bees, then flop under the lemon tree and doze with his tongue hanging out. He had a bark, but he rarely used it. Only when the UPS guy approached without knocking, or when he heard that strange, high-pitched click in the air before thunderstorms. And always, if someone lingered too long at my gate. I remember the first time I saw Karen, though back then I didn't know her name. It was early spring, around April, and the wisteria was just starting to bloom. She had just moved into the stucco house at the corner, the one that used to belong to the Farrells. They were warm people, hosted Halloween cider parties, and lent out folding chairs to everyone. When their daughter got married in the backyard, the whole street helped hang lights. Karen didn't wave when she moved in. She nodded. That was it. She nodded from behind oversized sunglasses and walked briskly from the car to the house like she was allergic to neighborly chatter. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Not everyone's social, and I've learned not to take quiet personally. But still, there was a shift in the wind, a change in the air pressure, one of those things you can't prove, but you feel it just the same. One morning, Tucker barked, not loud, not frantic, just a single alert. I looked up and saw Karen standing by my gate, frowning down at something. I opened the door and waved. She didn't wave back, just turned around and walked off. Tucker gave a soft woof. I gave him a biscuit. Still, those were peaceful days, the kind you miss before they're gone. On weekends, I'd take Tucker to the little park near the elementary school. We'd sit on the bench by the swings, and he'd lean against my legs while I read the local paper. I could feel the weight of his head on my lap and hear just enough: the wind in the trees, the scrape of sneakers on concrete, laughter in the distance, sound filter, read through the good ear, and memory filled in the rest. Sometimes I'd think of Carlos, my husband. He used to whistle when he walked into a room, a habit he developed so I'd always know he was there. After he passed in 2015, the house felt different, not empty, just unfinished. Tucker changed that. He started doing this thing where he'd pace in front of the bedroom door every night at 10 o'clock p.m. like Carlos used to. It wasn't taught, it just happened, as if he'd taken over the post. That's why the complaint hit me like it did. Not because it was about noise, but because of what it meant. But I'm getting ahead of myself. At that time, all I knew was peace. Not perfect peace, but the kind you work hard to build after years of loss, loneliness, and learning how to live with silence. And Tucker was the heart of it. Every bark had a reason, every routine had a rhythm, and every neighbor, until then, had respected that rhythm. Karen hadn't lived here long, but something about her had the chill of winter that wouldn't let go. The kind of cold that creeps in through the siding and settles in your bones without you realizing it. Still, I held out hope. Maybe she was just adjusting. Maybe she'd come around. After all, this was a good street. Birch Lane had seen bake-offs and garden swaps. It had survived 2 floods, 3 real estate bubbles, and that time someone's goat got loose for a week and lived in the cul-de-sac like a cryptid. We were a community, not perfect, but kind. At least, that's what I believed, until the day the letter arrived. But that's not this act. This act was still filled with jasmine and bees, donuts, and garden gloves. This act was still peaceful. This act still had Tucker curled up beside me, both of us listening, in our own way, for what the world had to say. The letter was folded in thirds, crisp like it had never been touched by human hands. Just fed through a printer and sealed with self-importance. It wasn't even in an envelope, just tucked into the slats of my screen door like a warning, fluttering in the breeze like it had something to say before I even opened it. The header read, Birch Lane Homeowners Association, Courtesy Violation Notice, date, May 4th, 2024. I stood there in my gardening gloves, the scent of lemon balm clinging to my sleeves, Tucker sitting obediently beside me. He tilted his head when I didn't move, just stared at that paper like it had spoken a language I wasn't supposed to understand. The violation? Ongoing disruption, excessive barking. Resident canine has been observed creating a persistent auditory disturbance inconsistent with HOA Section 4B, nuisance noise. Continued disruption may result in financial penalties. At the bottom was a signature, slanted and sharp. Karen Ellison, HOA Compliance Officer, so that was her name. I looked out toward the street. Her blinds were drawn tight, like eyelids refusing to blink. Her black SUV sat gleaming in the driveway, not a leaf out of place on her chemically treated lawn. She had 2 fake owls on the roof to scare away birds. No porch furniture, no children's chalk drawings, just clean silence. Tucker whined. I patted his head. You're not loud, I whispered. She just doesn't know how to listen. Up until that moment, I had assumed Karen was just reserved. The kind of neighbor who takes time to warm up. We all have those. People dealing with something invisible, carrying quiet burdens. But this was something else. It wasn't just about my dog. It was about control. The next morning, she approached. No good morning, no wave, just that stiff posture, clipboard in hand like it was a badge of honor. I just wanted to follow up on the noise. A complaint, she said, lips pressed like she was holding back a sneeze of judgment. We're trying to maintain community standards. Several neighbors have mentioned the barking. Several? I asked. She didn't answer. Tucker sat at my feet, silent. I haven't heard him bark more than once or twice this week, I added calmly, and I sleep through most sounds anyway. Karen blinked. Well, some of us don't. Her eyes flicked to the wind chimes on my porch, then to the slightly uneven hedge I hadn't trimmed yet, then to Tucker, who was now licking his paw like she wasn't worth his attention. This isn't personal, she said, flipping her page like it proved something. We just enforce what's fair. I smiled, a small, polite Californian smile. the kind you give someone when they've already decided they're right and nothing you say will change it. Well, I replied, what's fair is often a matter of perspective. She didn't like that. I could see it in the twitch of her eyebrow. From that point on, the notes came weekly. One in the mailbox, one taped to my fence, one slipped between the pages of the community newsletter like a passive-aggressive Easter egg. May 11th, dog audible from sidewalk during early morning hours. May 17th, barking recorded during Amazon delivery, 3:12 p.m. May 22nd, reminder, all pet noise must conform to community harmony guidelines. Community harmony. Like Tucker was a drum someone kept hitting out of tempo. I asked Mr. Yamamoto if he'd ever heard Tucker bark excessively. He chuckled. Only when my wife drops the recycling bin. Otherwise, he's a statue. I asked Lena from across the street, the one with the twin toddlers who scream with joy every time they see Tucker. He's quieter than my own kids, she laughed. Want me to sign something? But Karen didn't need actual complaints. She had a clipboard. That was power enough for her. Then CB set out. Aim the email. She found my address through the HOA directory and sent a message at 5:42 a.m. titled Unresolved Noise Issue, Final Warning. It read, Dear Ms. Ramirez, as a courtesy, we've provided ample time for remediation. However, ongoing disturbances persist. Under HOA protocol, continued non-compliance may result in a daily fine of $200, effective June 1st, 2024. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Karen Ellison, Compliance Officer, Birch Lane, HOA. I stared at the email for a long time. My coffee went cold beside me. Tucker nudged my leg. I hadn't even realized he'd laid his head there. That soft thump of connection, his way of saying, still here, still listening. I didn't cry. But something tightened inside me, a slow coil winding tighter around my chest. I wasn't afraid of Karen, not exactly. I was afraid of what she represented. Because people like her, they don't just want quiet. They want obedience. And they use rules like levers to move everyone around until the entire neighborhood feels like it belongs to them. And here's the thing. I've dealt with people like that before. At work, at church, in hospitals, when no one believed my pain because I didn't raise my voice like other patients. You learn to pick up their patterns, their posture, the way they talk to you like your presence is the problem. But Karen made one mistake. She thought my silence meant surrender. She didn't know who I was, she didn't know what Tucker was trained to do, and she definitely didn't know what I kept in the cabinet under the stairs. A binder full of every HOA regulation since 2005, annotated in red ink by someone who may be quiet, but has never, ever been powerless. The pressure was building. I could feel it. Neighbors stopped waving when Karen stood at their door too long. I heard whispers that she was collecting supporting statements. One woman at the park stopped, let ting her kid pet Tucker. Another sent me a message that just read, Sorry, I can't get involved. That hurt the most, but I didn't raise hell, not yet. Because if Karen wanted a paper war, she had no idea she'd picked the wrong postmaster. It started with silence, not mine, but the neighborhood's. After Karen's campaign of letters and emails, the cheerful small talk that once echoed across Birch Lane dried up like summer grass. People who used to wave now nodded from a distance. Porch conversations grew shorter. It was like everyone had collectively learned to whisper, and I knew why. She was keeping score. Karen's power didn't come from bylaws. It came from fear. Fear of fines, citations, HOA hearings no one wanted to attend. She wasn't loud. She didn't need to be. All she had to do was lean in close and say things like, That fence is 2 inches too high. Your hose reel isn't HOA approved. The garden flags might violate our political signage clause. One family down the street removed their tree swing overnight. Another took down a pride flag from their porch and claimed it just faded. But it hadn't. We both knew it. Karen had spoken to them. They just didn't want to admit it. And in the middle of this chilled silence, Tucker and I walked our usual route, his leash loose, my steps steady, both of us pretending the world hadn't shifted under our feet. But the pressure wasn't subtle for long. On June 3rd, I received a certified letter, not a warning this time, a formal notice of violation, complete with a billing statement, $600. 3 days of ongoing auditory disturbance. They had backdated the fine to June 1st, the deadline Karen had set in her email. 3 days. 3 barks, 130 decibels of perceived offense, measured by no one, no proof, no timestamp, just an accusation signed and sealed with HOA stationery. I called the number listed. A voicemail picked up. You've reached the Birch Lane Homeowners Association complaint line. For violations or dispute resolution, please refer to your member handbook or attend our monthly board meeting. Dispute resolution. Like I was trying to return a blender, not defend my companion. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with Tucker curled around my feet and pulled out the HOA handbook. A soft binder with laminated pages and too many sections written in vague legalese. The kind of language designed not to clarify, but to confuse. But I don't confuse easily. Section 4B, nuisance noise. No resident shall permit persistent or unreasonable noise disturbances, including but not limited to excessive barking, mechanical equipment, or musical instruments. Reasonable allowances shall be made for time of day, weather events, and natural behavior. Natural behavior. I highlighted that part. And then I started highlighting more, cross-referencing every rule about pets, violations, appeals, even the obscure 4C clause about medically necessary assistance animals, which Karen had conveniently never mentioned. Still, the fines kept coming. June 6th, another letter. Second notice, unresolved noise violation, additional $200 fine. June 9th, final warning before board review. By June 12th, the total reached $200, all without a hearing, all without a single decibel recorded, just Karen's word and a few anonymous neighbor reports that no one seemed willing to confirm or deny. And then came the anonymous letters, typed, no return address, slipped under my door or left tucked in my rose bushes. Some of us moved here for peace and quiet. You seem nice, just do the right thing. Maybe you should consider rehoming the dog if you can't control him. I read that last one twice. Then I folded it neatly and put it in the drawer where I keep Simpat. High cards and death notices. That's what it felt like after all, a kind of social obituary, the community's quiet way of saying, you're no longer welcome. I wasn't angry yet. Not fully. I was still hoping someone would knock on my door and say, this has gone too far. But instead, they kept backing away, slowly, like I was contagious. The grocery delivery guy started leaving bags on the sidewalk instead of my porch. Mr. Yamamoto stopped handing over Tucker's donut in person and just left it on the fence post. The kids who used to pet him crossed the street when they saw us coming. That was the worst of it. Tucker didn't understand. He'd sit at the sidewalk tail thumping, waiting for a little girl in a red jacket to run up and giggle at his tricks. But she never came. And when he barked once, just once, because a crow flew too low across the lawn, a curtain snapped shut across the street. The isolation hit me harder than the fines. I hadn't realized how much of my healing was tied to this place, to this neighborhood, to the sound of greetings and footsteps and the simple joy of being seen. Now I was a problem to be tolerated, a disruption with fur and a leash. I began documenting everything. Every letter, every timestamp, every walk, and every minute Tucker spent silent at my side. I bought a small audio recorder and kept it clipped to my belt. If they wanted to pretend he was a menace, I'd show them what real noise sounded like. Not barking, but injustice. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something deeper happening. This wasn't just about Tucker. It wasn't even about Karen's obsession with bylaws. It felt coordinated, manufactured. I went back through old newsletters, HOA rosters, meeting notes. And that's when I saw something odd. Karen Ellison had only been listed as compliance officer since March. Before that, she wasn't on the board at all. So how did she suddenly become the one signing every notice, delivering every letter? And why was she so fixated on me? I found a listing online, an old real estate posting for my house, dated February 2023, a cached page with a local agent's watermark. So I called the number. The receptionist transferred me to a realtor, a polite woman who hesitated before answering. Oh, yes. I remember that property. We had interest from a buyer back then, young couple, I think. But the deal fell through. The seller pulled out before closing. That was news to me. I wasn't selling. I never had. But someone had listed the address, maybe as a placeholder, maybe as part of a quiet probe. Maybe someone had plans for Birch Lane that didn't include a stubborn widow with a loyal dog and a record of not backing down, and that someone might have worn oversized sunglasses and carried a clipboard. Karen wasn't just enforcing the rules, she was reshaping the block. One neighbor at a time, and I was next in line. I didn't sleep much after that call. Not because I was afraid, not anymore, but because something in me had clicked into place, an old part of myself I hadn't touched in years, the part that used to run a mail route in East San Jose and memorize 300 names and addresses like muscle memory, the part that managed 4 union disputes without raising my voice, the part that raised 2 children on night shifts, widowhood, and grace. That part had been quiet long enough. By morning I had the coffee brewed, the dining table cleared, and a stack of files laid out like a war map. I started with the listing. The cached real estate post hadn't shown up in a basic search. I'd only found it by digging through a zip code-specific MLS archive. It had no photos, just the street address, square footage, and the phrase, "Ideal for redevelopment, quiet street, low turnover, no pets." That was the line that stuck with me, no pets, because that wasn't a description, that was an agenda. I cross-referenced the agent's name with public filings and found 3 other homes in the area that had sold in the past 6 months, all tied to the same boutique agency, Ellison Property Group. Yes, Ellison, as in Karen Ellison. It didn't take much to put it together. Karen wasn't just a compliance officer, she was a realtor, a power player, and this street wasn't her home, it was her portfolio. But I still needed more, so I started collecting. I pulled HOA meeting minutes for the last 12 months. Every PDF, every scanned copy someone had emailed but never read. I created a spreadsheet, color-coded every vote, cross-checked every anonymous complaint against the dates of nearby listings or sales. And wouldn't you know it? Every time a property got flagged for violation, it went on the market within 3 months. The fines would stack, the pressure would mount, and then, like magic, the owners would list. Some claimed they were downsizing, others wanted a quieter lifestyle. But it all smelled the same. Manufactured disruption, strategic intimidation, and a woman with a clipboard who knew how to play the long game. But here's what she didn't know. I used to be a federal records processor before I joined the Postal Service. For 7 years, I worked for a division of the Office of Public Records and Planning. I know how to read zoning language, I know what quiet title transfer means, and I know how to file a Freedom of Information Act request faster than most lawyers. So that's what I did. I filed 2 FOIAs and a local request under California's sunshine laws for all code enforcement complaints on Birch Lane in the last 24 months, for public communications between the HOA board and the Ellison Property Group, for ownership transfer filings tied to Karen's office. While those requests were pending, I took the next step. I called Angela Lopez. We hadn't spoken in years, not since her retirement party in 2018. But Angela had once been a district supervisor in San Mateo's Planning Commission, and we'd worked a case together involving mailbox theft and zoning violations. She owed me a favor. She picked up on the 3rd ring. "Elena," she said, "is that you? You still organizing food drives over there?" "I'm organizing something," I said, "but this time it's about barking dogs and dirty politics." Angela listened. I laid it all out. Every fine, every letter, the fake citations, the old listing, the pattern of property sales. When I got to the part about the no pets clause in the MLS posting, she paused. "Elena," she said, her voice lowering, "this sounds like they're trying to reclassify the block as a quiet zone for eventual redevelopment." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," she sighed, "if enough houses are sold under that clause, a developer can petition to convert the neighborhood into sensitive zoning. And once it's reclassified, pets can be banned. So can outdoor gatherings, gardening, even wind chimes." I nearly dropped the phone. Tucker, asleep on the rug, stirred and blinked at me. "Can they really do that?" I asked. Angela was quiet for a moment. "Not if you have proof they're coercing residents," she said. "You get me that? I'll get this in front of the Board of Supervisors." I hung up and got to work. For the next 2 weeks, I became my own paralegal. I photographed my home from every angle. I installed a decibel meter on my porch and logged Tucker's bark patterns. I interviewed the few neighbors still willing to talk, and even a few who weren't, as long as I promised not to use their names. One of them, a soft-spoken nurse named Elliot, confided in me behind a privacy fence. "She told me my kids made too much noise on the trampoline," he whispered, said the HOA had received a complaint. But I never saw anything in writing. We listed our house a month later. "Was it your idea?" I asked. "No," he said. "It was hers." On June 25th, I received the first batch of FOIA results. The documents were dry, Pages and pages of compliance logs, timestamps, notes from Karen's personal Gmail account, sloppily used in public business, and HOA agendas. But buried in the logs was gold. A flagged note from March 3rd. Potential buyer interested in 3-parcel redevelopment. Noise sensitivity cited as priority. Explore animal-related violations as leverage. I read that line 6 times. Then I printed it, highlighted it, added it to my binder. The next day I hand-delivered the file to Angela. She promised to escalate it immediately. But I wasn't done. There was one more thing I needed, an audience. And I was going to get it the way Karen hated most, loudly. So I emailed the HOA board, CC'd every resident on Birch Lane, attached my binder summary and my audio logs, and then I submitted a formal request to speak at the July 1st board meeting, citing HOA Rule 7.4, resident rights to address the board regarding procedural disputes. They couldn't deny me, they had to hear me, and for the first time in months, I wasn't just reacting. I was ready. The game had changed. I wasn't just a woman with a dog. I was a whistleblower. And Karen? She was about to learn that the only thing louder than a bark is the truth. The July 1st HOA board meeting was held in the community rec room, a beige box of a building with flickering fluorescents and metal folding chairs that always felt colder than the room itself, the kind of place where petty tyrants thrive under bad lighting and free coffee. Karen was already there when I arrived. Clipboard, pressed slacks, hair pulled so tight it looked like it hurt. She sat near the front, flanked by 2 other board members. Paul Granger, the treasurer with a calculator watch, and Linda Ngo, the secretary who mostly nodded through everything. I brought 2 things, a canvas tote bag with documentation, photos, recordings, and legal codes sorted by tab. Tucker, on leash, freshly groomed, his vest on that read, Hearing Support Companion, in bold embroidery. As soon as we walked in, Karen's eyes narrowed. "He can't be in here," she said flatly. "He's allowed under ADA," I replied calmly, "unless you'd like to challenge federal law at a public meeting." She didn't respond, but her jaw twitched like it wanted to. The chairs filled up fast, more than usual. Word had spread, thanks to my email. Neighbors who hadn't spoken to me in weeks were suddenly making eye contact. Some offered small nods, others avoided my gaze entirely. But I could feel the shift in the room. This wasn't business as usual. At exactly 6:02 p.m., the meeting was called to order. Karen started in that soft, sing-songy tone that people use when they want to sound kind but mean control. "Before we begin," she said, "I'd like to remind everyone that tonight's meeting is limited to board business, and resident comments must adhere to previously submitted topics." "I submitted mine under Rule 7.4, I said, 3 weeks ago, with full documentation." There was a pause. Paul checked a folder. Karen looked annoyed. Linda cleared her throat. "Yes, it's on the agenda. Item 6. "Thank you," I nodded. Then I waited. 5 items passed. Budget amendments, flowerbed complaints, something about overgrown ivy near the sign. And then it was my turn. I stood up. Tucker stood too. "My name is Elena Ramirez," I said. "I've lived on Birch Lane since 1997. I've received over $2,200 in fines in the last month for excessive dog noise. I'm here to prove those citations were fraudulent, biased, and part of a larger pattern of harassment, one that may involve abuse of HOA power and unethical real estate dealings." A ripple went through the room, quiet gasps. Someone. He dropped a pen. Karen crossed her arms. "Let's keep this professional." "I am," I said, "and I'll begin with Exhibit A." I pulled a packet from the tote and handed copies to the board. It contained the recording logs from my audio monitor, time-stamped sound levels from my property for 3 weeks. "Maximum bark count," I said, 2 per day, usually during deliveries, well within normal levels under Section 4B. Paul skimmed the first page. "This is pretty thorough." "It gets better," I said. Exhibit B. A printed FOIA document showing Karen's notes referencing animal violations as leverage in correspondence related to a developer inquiry. "Did you or did you not write this, Ms. Ellison?" I asked. Karen's face went pale. "That's taken out of context." I turned to the audience. Context matters, I said. So does motive. Exhibit C, HOA violation patterns mapped against recent property listings. 5 homes on Birch Lane had sold within 3 months of repeat violations, all processed through Ellison Property Group. The room got quieter. I wasn't yelling. I didn't need to. I just kept revealing facts, one after the other. A neighbor, Elliot, the nurse, stood up. She threatened to fine us over our kid's trampoline, he said, then asked if we'd consider listing before fall. I never told anyone, until now. Someone else spoke. She told me my husband's wheelchair ramp was an eyesore, an older woman said, trembling. We didn't know what to do. We almost moved. Karen stood. This is a character assassination. No, I said. This is clarity. You tried to turn a quiet street into a silent one, not for peace, but for profit. Then I laid down the final piece. Exhibit D, a notarized letter from Angela Lopez, former planning commissioner, confirming that Karen had attempted to submit a preliminary zoning interest form for Birch Lane, classifying it as a potential quietus, a redevelopment zone. You never wanted less barking, I said. You wanted fewer people who'd question you. Gasps, shuffling chairs, a slow, steady shift of heads turning, not toward me, but toward Karen. And then came the voice that sealed it. I moved to suspend Ms. Ellison's voting privileges and launch a formal ethics investigation. It was Paul, the treasurer. Linda nodded. Seconded. Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. It passed unanimously. I sat down. Tucker rested his chin on my shoe. The meeting adjourned shortly after, but the conversations didn't stop. People gathered in knots, talking fast, exchanging numbers, apologizing. Should have spoken up sooner, someone said. You didn't deserve that, another whispered. Thank you, a third simply said, with tears in her eyes. As I walked home, the air felt different, warmer, real. Tucker trotted a little ahead, tail swaying with every step. When we passed Karen's house, her blinds didn't twitch, her SUV was gone. The porch light flickered out behind drawn curtains. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just walked. Because justice isn't loud. It's steady. It's evidence, courage, and the refusal to sit down when standing up matters most. 2 weeks after the board meeting, a plain white envelope appeared in my mailbox. No stamps, no return address. Just one word in faint ink on the back flap: resignation. Inside was a short letter. Effective immediately. I resign from my position as HOA compliance officer. I will no longer participate in board matters. Karen Ellison. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a quiet retreat, exactly how she'd arrived. I didn't frame it, didn't even keep it. I tossed it in the shredder with the rest of the outdated notices and fabricated fines. Because I wasn't interested in souvenirs, I was interested in healing. And that began the moment her silence replaced her threats. The board voted to rescind all fines against me, every single dollar. The official statement read by Linda at the next meeting cited procedural failures and overreach of authority. They even offered to refund the legal filing fees I'd spent assembling my evidence. I declined. I didn't do it for the money, I told them. I did it because no one should be punished for needing help. Tucker got a treat that night. Okay, 3, and a long walk under a lavender sunset where neighbors didn't look away. They smiled. Some even stopped. Hey, Elena, one said. That garden of yours is looking beautiful again. Thank you, I replied. It never stopped blooming, we just stopped looking. Something shifted on Birch Lane after that. Not all at once, not loudly, but like spring after a long frost. People started talking again. The Martins 2 doors down put their tree swing back up. The twins across the street started waving from their window when Tucker passed. Even Mr. Yamamoto, who rarely spoke more than a sentence, stopped by with a small gift, a packet of heirloom tomato seeds and a sticky note that said, "For the fight, you held your ground." We planted them near the lemon tree. I added a wind chime back to the porch, the same one Karen once commented was a bit too expressive. I tuned it by ear, letting the breeze decide which notes should ring loudest. The mail started arriving on the porch again, not at the edge of the sidewalk like a shameful offering, and the grocery guy asked if he could bring treats for Tucker next time. I said yes. One morning, Lena, the mother of the little boy with red rain boots, knocked on my door. Her son clutched a crayon drawing, Tucker in front of my roses, tail wagging, smile wide. Above it in wobbly letters, thank you for your dog. That one I did frame. In August, the board held an open forum to revise the HOA rules. This time residents showed up, not just to listen, but to lead. We proposed a pet companion clause protecting residents from discrimination based on medical support animals, a requirement for recorded violations to be supported by verifiable audio or visual evidence, and a cap on the number of times any one board member can issue a violation without independent review. All three passed, unanimously. They even asked me to join the board. I declined politely. I've done my time with paperwork, I smiled. Let someone else carry the clipboard for a while. But I promised to help review cases that involved elderly residents, disabilities, or assistance animals, because if anyone tried this again, they'd meet someone who knew how to fight it. And this time, they wouldn't be alone. Tucker kept watch, as always. He's getting older now, grayer around the muzzle, a little slower to chase bees, but still sharp, still mine, and still listening in ways most people never learn to. He hears the tremble in my voice when I'm tired, the hollow click of a tea mug on the counter, the storm coming before the clouds arrive. He barked once last week, just once. A hawk flew too low over the fence, and he let out one sharp protective sound, then looked at me like, "Still got it." I smiled. "Yes, you do." Some nights, I sit on the porch with my tea and watch the streetlights come on one by one, not in perfect sync, but close enough, like people trying to find rhythm again after disharmony. That's what this street feels like now, not perfect, but real. Birch Lane survived a storm of silence, not just the absence of sound, but the kind that creeps in when people are too scared to speak. And now, the voices are back. The squeak of swings, the giggle of chalk-covered kids, the rustle of gardens being replanted, and the steady steps of a golden retriever patrolling his kingdom with calm confidence. I've thought a lot about what I would have lost if I'd given in. If I had paid the fines, given up the fight, rehomed my dog. But the truth is, it was never just about Tucker. It was about everything he represented. Companionship, independence, the right to be seen and heard, even in silence. Because when you live with hearing loss, the world already feels distant. You spend your life reading lips, watching shadows, memorizing tones so you don't miss the subtle turns of human connection. The last thing you should ever be told is that your one anchor to that world is too loud. Karen tried to take away my dog. What she lost was control. And Tucker? He's still here. He still barks at thunderstorms. He still waits by the mailbox for Mr. Yamamoto's donut. He still nudges me awake before the alarm ever rings. And yesterday, he turned 9. We threw a little party, just me, a neighbor or two, and one very enthusiastic toddler in red boots. There were peanut butter dog treats, there was cake, and yes, there was barking. But it wasn't noise, it was joy. And joy doesn't ask for permission. It rings out. It declares, "I'm here, I belong, and I'm not going anywhere." Not every battle is loud. Sometimes it looks like paperwork at midnight. Sometimes it sounds like a single bark in the silence. And sometimes it's just one neighbor refusing to be erased. If you've ever been told to sit down, stay quiet, or just comply, remember this: rules were made to serve people, not to silence them. And the smallest fight, the one over a garden, a ramp, a dog, can reveal the biggest truths about who we are as a community. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had to defend something small that meant everything? A coop, a flag, a front porch wind chime? Let me know in the comments, because you never know who else might need the courage to speak up, and your story might be the spark. And if you're still here, thank you for listening, for caring, for proving that quiet doesn't mean powerless. Hit that subscribe button if you want more true stories where truth barks back, and share this with someone who needs to hear. You don't have to be loud to be heard, not when you're standing on truth.